The wine bottle arrived at Melissa's table with a flourish. The waiter's smile as fake as my wife's surprised expression. I watched from across the restaurant as she read my message tied to the neck. You're the one who's been lying. Her face went white, then red. Then she grabbed her phone like it was a lifeline. My phone buzzed 30 seconds later. We need to talk. Now. I took a sip of my beer and grinned. Rule number 1 in this game. Never play chess with someone who thinks they're holding all the pieces. My name is Dave Harker, and I'm what you'd call professionally invisible. I fix computer systems for a living, which means people only notice me when something's broken. At 35, I've perfected the art of being underestimated. Blue-collar roots, sarcastic mouth, and the kind of face that blends into crowds. Perfect for what I was about to do. Melissa Harker, my wife of 8 years, sells high-end real estate to Seattle's tech elite. She's got the perfect smile, perfect hair, and apparently, a perfect side piece named Marshall Keating. Mars, as his friends call him, thinks he's God's gift to property development. Custom Jeep, spray tan, and a license plate that reads MARS1. The kind of guy who uses bro unironically and thinks a firm handshake can solve world hunger. The signs had been there for months. Late-night client dinners, phone buzzing at all hours, lipstick stains on wine glasses that weren't her shade. But the real kicker? Finding a hotel receipt in her purse for a place she'd supposedly never been. When I asked about it, she claimed it was for a client showing. Funny thing about lies, they're like cockroaches. Find one, and there's always more hiding in the dark. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, sitting in Bree's bar, nursing beers, and planning my next move. Brian Sanderson, Bree to his friends, owns the Rusty Anchor, the kind of dive bar where everybody knows everybody's business. He's been my best friend since high school, and he's got dirt on half the neighborhood. You sure about this, Dave? Bree had asked the night before, polishing a glass with the dedication of a man avoiding eye contact. Maybe you should just talk to her. Talk's cheap, I'd replied. Actions speak louder. Now, watching Melissa fumble with her phone across the restaurant, I felt that familiar surge of satisfaction. The same feeling I got when I fixed a particularly stubborn computer problem. Everything in its place, every variable accounted for. My phone rang. Melissa's panicked voice filled my ear. Dave, what the hell is this? Where are you? Close enough to see you sweating, I said, standing up from my corner booth. She spun around, spotted me, and her expression shifted from panic to fury in record time. You're sick, she hissed as I approached her table. Following me? Spying on me? Funny thing about spying, I interrupted, pulling out the chair across from her. It's only necessary when someone's hiding something. So, Mel, what are you hiding? She tried the innocent act first. Wide eyes, trembling lip, the whole performance. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, text messages to M that would make a sailor blush. Her face crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. You went through my phone? Didn't have to. You left it open on the kitchen counter last Tuesday, right next to your coffee and your conscience, apparently. The tears came next, followed by the excuses. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. Mars was just a friend, a business contact, a shoulder to cry on because I was never home, never present, never the man she married. Thank God for small favors, I muttered. What? Nothing. Continue with your performance. I'm sure the other diners are enjoying the show. That's when she dropped the bomb. Not only had she been screwing Mars for 6 months, but they'd been planning their future together. Our future, actually. Mars had his eye on our house, prime real estate in a gentrifying neighborhood. The plan was simple. Divorce me, take half of everything, then sell the house to Mars at below market value. He'd flip it for a massive profit, they'd split the proceeds, and I'd be left with nothing but memories and a forwarding address. You've got it all figured out, I said, genuinely impressed by the audacity. There's just one problem. What's that? I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment. You're not the only one who can play games. The next morning, I started moving pieces on my own chessboard. First stop, the bank. Joint accounts are wonderful things when you're the primary account holder and your spouse has been too busy cheating to pay attention to financial details. I didn't clean them out, that would be illegal, but I did transfer my half to a new account, along with a few other assets that were technically mine. Second stop, the utility companies. Amazing how quickly you can get services transferred when you're the one who set them up in the first place. Melissa would come home to a dark, cold house with no internet. In her line of work, that was basically a death sentence. Third stop, Vince's security company. Vince Kowalski was an ex-cop who specialized in residential protection services. For $500, he'd install a state-of-the-art security system in my house, motion sensors, cameras, and a few special surprises I'd cooked up myself. But the real masterpiece was Mars's Jeep. I found it parked in my driveway, like he already owned the place. The arrogance was breathtaking. So I gave him a little welcome gift, 2 pounds of raw shrimp, carefully inserted into his exhaust system. Seattle in August is hot and humid. Perfect weather for seafood to ripen. By the time Mars discovered his predicament 3 days later, his precious Jeep smelled like a fish market in a power outage. The whole neighborhood could smell it from 2 blocks away. Mrs. Pruitt, our resident busybody and self-appointed neighborhood watch captain, posted about it on the community app. Terrible smell coming from Maple Street. Anyone else notice this? Could be a gas leak. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments. People complaining about the stench, speculating about dead animals, demanding action from the city. When Mars finally tracked down the source and had his Jeep towed to a shop, the mechanic's quote for cleaning was more than the vehicle was worth. That's when Mars made his first mistake. He came looking for me. I was at Bree's bar, celebrating my small victory with a beer and a basket of wings, when Mars burst through the door like an angry rhinoceros. His face was red, his fists were clenched, and he was shouting something about lawsuits and property damage. "You think you're clever?" he yelled, pointing at me with a finger that had clearly never done an honest day's work. "You think you can mess with me?" The bar went quiet. Everyone turned to watch the show. Bree reached for something under the counter, probably a baseball bat or a phone to call the cops. "I think you're confused," I said, not bothering to stand up. "This is a private establishment. You're trespassing." "Don't give me that legal bullshit. I know what you did to my car." "Your car?" I raised an eyebrow. "The one that was parked in my driveway without permission?" "That car?" Mars lunged at me. I saw it coming from a mile away. The guy telegraphed his moves like a semaphore operator. I simply stepped to the side and let momentum do the rest. Mars crashed into a table full of cocktails, sending glass and liquid flying everywhere. The other patrons scattered. Someone screamed, and Bree was already on the phone with 911. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "For the record," I announced to my impromptu audience, "this man just attacked me in a public establishment after illegally parking on my property. Everyone see that?" A chorus of nods and murmurs confirmed that, yes, everyone had seen Mars make an ass of himself. By the time the cops arrived, Mars was dripping with cosmopolitans and trying to explain why he'd driven across town to start a fight with a man half his size. The video went viral on the neighborhood app within hours. Mrs. Pruitt shared it with the caption, "Violence has no place in our community." The comments were brutal. People calling Mars a bully, a thug, questioning what kind of man picks fights in bars. His reputation took a hit that would make the Titanic jealous. But Melissa wasn't done fighting. She hired a lawyer, Reese Blackwood, a shark in a 3-piece suit who specialized in hostile divorces. The letter arrived 2 days later, full of legal threats and demands that I cease my harassment of his clients. I read it twice, then called my sister Trina. She runs a tattoo parlor downtown and has connections throughout the city's underground network of artists, bartenders, and small business owners. The kind of people who know everyone's secrets and aren't afraid to share them. "I need a favor," I told her. "How big a favor?" "The kind that ends marriages and ruins reputations." Trina laughed. "My favorite kind." "What do you need?" What I needed was information. Specifically, information about Mars's past relationships and business dealings. Trina's network delivered within 48 hours. Mars had been married twice before, both marriages ending in messy divorces involving infidelity. His infidelity. He'd cheated on wife number 1 with wife number 2, then cheated on wife number 2 with a series of clients and business partners. More importantly, wife number 2, Clarice Keating, was still in Seattle and still very, very angry about how her marriage had ended. She'd lost her house, her savings, and her social circle when Mars traded her in for a newer model. She was more than happy to help me return the favor. Clarice was a revelation. 35 years old, sharp as a razor, and carrying a grudge that could power a small city. She had photos, documents, and stories that painted Mars as a serial cheater and financial predator. But more than that, she had connections in the real estate world, connections who could spread rumors faster than wildfire. "He's planning to do the same thing to your wife that he did to me," Clarice warned during our coffee meeting. "Use her to get what he wants, then dump her when something better comes along." "Then we'd better make sure he doesn't get the chance," I replied. The plan we hatched was beautifully simple. I would host an open house at my own home, inviting all the neighbors and Melissa's professional contacts. The catch? I wouldn't tell Melissa about it. She'd come home to find dozens of strangers touring her house, examining her belongings, and asking pointed questions about the property's availability. The invitations went out through Mrs. Pruitt's neighborhood network and Clarice's real estate connections. "Exclusive preview of the Harker property," the message read. "Owner motivated to sell quickly." Melissa's reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. She arrived home to find her driveway packed with cars and her living room full of potential buyers. The look on her face when she walked through the front door was priceless. Confusion, then horror, then pure rage. "What the hell is going on here?" she screamed, pushing through the crowd of visitors. "Open house," I replied calmly, handing a flyer to a young couple examining our kitchen cabinets. "Thought you'd appreciate the professional networking opportunity." That's when Mars showed up. He'd been waiting in his rental car, his Jeep was still in the shop, and came charging through the front door like a knight in tarnished armor. The confrontation that followed was spectacular. "This is harassment!" Melissa shrieked, pointing at the crowd of strangers in her home. "These people have no right to be here." "Actually," I said, pulling out a folder of legal documents, "as joint owner of this property, I have every right to show it to potential buyers, especially since you've been so eager to sell it." Mars tried to play peacemaker, but his arrival only made things worse. The neighbors recognized him from the bar fight video, and whispers started spreading through the crowd. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. Mrs. Pruitt was taking notes like a court reporter.
"You need to leave,"
Mars told me, trying to sound authoritative. "This is between me and my girlfriend." "Girlfriend?" I looked at Melissa with mock surprise. "I thought you were still married." To me. The crowd was eating it up. 30-plus people watching a real-life soap opera unfold in their neighbor's living room. Melissa tried to salvage the situation by asking everyone to leave, but the damage was done. Her professional reputation was in tatters, and Mars looked like exactly what he was, a home-wrecking opportunist. The breaking point came when Mars, frustrated by his inability to control the situation, put his fist through my front window. The sound of shattering glass silenced the crowd, and someone immediately called the police. Mars was cited for property damage and disturbing the peace, though he wasn't arrested, just publicly humiliated in front of half the neighborhood's power players. After the police left and the crowd dispersed, I found myself alone with Melissa for the first time in weeks. She was sitting on our couch, head in her hands, looking like someone who'd just watched their life implode in real time. "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not doing anything to you," I replied. "I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. I made a mistake. Can't we work through this? A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is double booking a dinner reservation. What you did was plan my destruction while sharing my bed. There's no working through that." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. That's the beauty of it. I don't want your apologies, your explanations, or your promises to change. I just want you to understand that actions have consequences." The consequences came faster than I'd expected. Jody Chen, a reporter for the Seattle Tribune who specialized in local interest stories, had been at the open house. She'd smelled a story and started digging. Within a week, she'd uncovered the whole sordid tale. The affair, the property scheme, Mars's history of predatory relationships. The article ran on a Sunday, complete with photos from the open house and quotes from unnamed neighbors describing the shocking behavior they'd witnessed. Melissa's real estate firm quietly asked her to take a leave of absence. Mars's development company started getting calls from angry investors who'd seen the story. But Mars wasn't ready to give up. If anything, the public humiliation had made him more desperate and more dangerous. He started showing up at my house at odd hours, trying to intimidate me into backing down. That's when Vince's security system really paid for itself. The first time Mars tried to break in, the motion sensors triggered a series of bright lights and a loud alarm that woke up half the block. The second time, he got a face full of purple security dye from a modified paint bomb I'd rigged to the back gate. The stuff was designed for bank robberies. It wouldn't wash off for weeks. Mars stumbling around my backyard, covered in purple dye and cursing like a sailor, was caught on 3 different security cameras. The footage made its way to the neighborhood app within hours, and from there to social media. Number sign Purple Mars was trending in Seattle for 2 days. Lieutenant Kim Rodriguez from the Seattle PD's Domestic Disputes Division paid me a visit after the 3rd incident. She was a no-nonsense cop in her 40s who'd seen every kind of relationship drama imaginable. "Mr. Harker," she said, settling into my kitchen chair with a cup of coffee. "I need to ask you some questions about your ongoing dispute with Marshall Keating." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that determine whether I arrest him for stalking and harassment or arrest you for vigilante justice." I showed her the security footage, the police reports from Mars's previous visits, and the documentation of his threats. Lieutenant Rodriguez watched it all with the expression of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. "He's escalating," she observed. "Men like this don't usually stop until something forces them to stop. What do you recommend?" "Restraining order, official police protection, and maybe consider that your wife isn't the only victim here." That last comment stuck with me. Was Melissa a victim? She'd made her choices, planned my downfall, and thrown away 8 years of marriage for a chance at easy money. But she'd also gotten involved with a man who had a pattern of using and discarding women. Maybe we were both victims of Mars's manipulation. The thought lasted about 30 seconds, until I remembered the hotel receipts and the text messages planning my financial destruction. Melissa had made her bed. Now she could lie in it. The restraining order was approved within a week, but Mars ignored it. He showed up at my workplace, followed me to the grocery store, and left threatening voicemails on my phone. Lieutenant Rodriguez warned him twice, but he seemed to think his money and connections made him untouchable. That's when he made his biggest mistake. He challenged me to a fight at the annual neighborhood block party. The challenge came in the form of a drunken rant posted to the community app at 2 a.m. Dave Harker thinks he's tough, hiding behind lawyers and cameras. Let's settle this like men at the block party. No cops, no cameras, just us. Mrs. Pruitt shared the post with her own commentary. This kind of violence has no place in our community. Someone should do something. I replied publicly. Marshall, I accept your challenge. See you at the block party. The annual Maple Street block party was a neighborhood institution. Every August, we closed off the street, set up grills and bounce houses, and spent a day pretending we all liked each other. This year, it had the added excitement of a public confrontation that everyone had been anticipating for weeks. I spent the morning preparing. Not for a fight, I had no intention of actually fighting Mars, but for a performance. I had learned something important over the past few months. Public humiliation was more effective than physical violence. Violence made you a criminal. Humiliation made you a legend. Clarice arrived early, bringing 2 of Mars's other ex-girlfriends and a folder full of documentation about his business practices. Jody Chen was there with a camera, ready to live stream whatever happened. Even Trina had closed her tattoo parlor for the day to watch the show. Mars showed up around noon, already drunk and spoiling for a fight. He'd brought Joey, his muscle-bound assistant, and a few other hangers-on who looked like they'd been recruited from a gym's protein powder aisle. The confrontation started slowly, Mars making loud comments about cowards who hide behind women and lawyers. Me ignoring him while flipping burgers and chatting with neighbors, the tension building like pressure in a steam engine. The explosion came when Mars grabbed my shoulder and spun me around to face him. "I'm talking to you, you little weasel. And I'm ignoring you, you purple-faced moron." That got a laugh from the crowd. Mars's face, still faintly purple from the security dye, turned an even deeper shade of red. "You think you're funny? You think destroying people's lives is a joke? I think you destroyed your own life. I just provided the entertainment." Mars swung at me, a wild, drunken haymaker that I saw coming from next Tuesday. I stepped aside, stuck out my foot, and let physics handle the rest. Mars tumbled face first into the kiddie pool that the Johnson family had set up for their toddlers. The splash was magnificent. Mars came up sputtering, soaked and covered in pool toys. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Someone started chanting my name. Mrs. Pruitt was recording everything on her phone. But I wasn't done yet. While Mars floundered in 18 inches of chlorinated water, I climbed onto a picnic table and addressed the crowd like a politician at a rally. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I want to tell you a story about a man who thought he could take whatever he wanted. A man who destroyed 2 marriages, cheated dozens of business partners, and planned to steal my home while sleeping with my wife." I had their attention. 60-plus neighbors, their kids, and half the local media hanging on every word. "This man," I pointed at Mars, who was still trying to extract himself from the kiddie pool, "has spent the last 6 months terrorizing me, my wife, and this entire neighborhood. He's threatened violence, damaged property, and turned our quiet street into his personal battlefield." Melissa tried to interrupt, but the crowd shouted her down. They wanted to hear the rest of the story. "But here's the thing about bullies," I continued. "They're only scary until someone stands up to them. They're only powerful until someone exposes them for what they really are." I pulled out a folder and started reading. Hotel receipts showing Mars's affairs with married clients. Police reports from his previous domestic disputes. Financial documents showing his pattern of using romantic relationships to acquire and flip properties. This man has built his entire life on taking advantage of other people. He finds lonely, unhappy women, promises them a better life, then uses them to steal from their families. My wife was just his latest victim. That was a lie, of course. Melissa had been a willing participant in the scheme. But the crowd didn't know that, and the narrative of Mars as predator and Melissa as victim played better than the truth. Mars finally managed to stand up, water dripping from his designer clothes and his dignity in tatters. "You don't know what you're talking about," he sputtered. "Don't I?" I held up my phone. "Should I play the recording of you explaining how you were going to take over the Harker house and teach that computer nerd a lesson?" I didn't actually have such a recording, but Mars didn't know that. His face went white, then red, then purple again. "You're all crazy," he announced to the crowd. "This whole neighborhood is full of crazy people." "Maybe," I replied, "but we're crazy people who look out for each other, and we don't appreciate outsiders coming in and trying to destroy our families." The crowd applauded again. Mars looked around, realized he was outnumbered about 50 to 1, and started backing toward his rental car. "This isn't over," he called out. "Yes, it is," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, appearing beside him with 2 other officers. "Marshal Keating, you're under arrest for violating a restraining order, public intoxication, and disturbing the peace." As they led Mars away in handcuffs, still dripping pool water and muttering about lawsuits, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced in months. Not satisfaction. This had gone beyond personal satisfaction. This was justice. Melissa approached me as the crowd began to disperse. She looked older somehow, worn down by months of stress and public scrutiny. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you figure out what kind of person you want to be," I replied. "Without Mars, without me, without anyone else to blame for your choices. I'm sorry, Dave, for all of it. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix broken trust. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. Sorry is just a word people use when they get caught." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "What about us?" "There is no us. There hasn't been for months. You just didn't bother to tell me." As Melissa walked away, probably for the last time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the quiet contentment of a job well done. I'd protected my home, exposed a predator, and given my neighbors a story they'd be telling for years. Mrs. Pruitt appeared at my elbow, still clutching her phone. "Best block party ever," she declared. "Next year, you're in charge of entertainment." I laughed. Genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. "Next year, I'm bringing popcorn." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Mars spent 3 days in jail before making bail, but his legal troubles were just beginning. Clarice and his other ex-girlfriends had filed a class-action lawsuit alleging fraud and emotional distress. The IRS had opened an investigation into his business practices. His development company was hemorrhaging investors and contracts. Melissa filed for divorce a week later, but there wasn't much left to fight over. The house was underwater on its mortgage, thanks to the market downturn. Our joint assets had been legally separated months earlier, and her career in real estate was effectively over. She moved back in with her parents and started working at a department store while she figured out her next move. As for me, I got exactly what I'd wanted from the beginning: my self-respect, my home, and the loyalty of my neighbors. The security system stayed up, the neighborhood watch got a lot more serious about protecting their own, and Mrs. Pruitt appointed herself my unofficial publicist. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying a beer and watching the sunset, when Trina stopped by with takeout from our favorite Thai place. "Any regrets?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. I thought about it for a moment. Did I regret the months of planning and scheming? The public humiliation of my wife and her lover? The destruction of relationships and reputations? "Just one," I said finally. "What's that?" "I should have charged admission to the block party. Could have made enough money to fix that window Mars broke." Trina laughed. "You're terrible." "No," I corrected, raising my beer in a mock toast. "I'm thorough." There's a difference. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reflected on the lessons I'd learned. Marriage is built on trust, and once that trust is broken, all the apologies in the world can't repair it. Bullies only have power when people are afraid to stand up to them. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's making sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with. Mars never returned to Seattle. Last I heard, he'd moved to Phoenix and was trying to start over in a new market with a new identity. Melissa eventually found work with a small real estate firm in Spokane, far from the gossip network that had destroyed her reputation in Seattle. As for me, I kept fixing computers, kept living in my house, and kept being professionally invisible. But now I had something I'd never had before: the certain knowledge that when push came to shove, I could push back harder than anyone expected. The neighborhood settled back into its normal rhythm of minor dramas and major gossip. Mrs. Pruitt found new scandals to document and share. The annual block party returned to its traditional format of grilled food and awkward small talk. But sometimes, on quiet evenings like this one, neighbors would stop by to chat, and inevitably bring up the story of the man who took on the neighborhood bully and won. They'd ask for details, want to hear about the planning and execution, marvel at the completeness of the victory. I'd tell them the truth, that it wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It wasn't about destroying lives, it was about protecting the community we'd built together. And it wasn't about being the biggest or strongest or richest. It was about being smarter, more patient, and more determined than the people who thought they could take advantage of you. The thing about glass houses, I'd always conclude, is that everyone can see what's happening inside. The trick is making sure you're not the one with something to hide. And as the last light faded from the Seattle sky, I'd sit back in my chair, finish my beer, and smile at the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win.